till we turn on our mics. So let me make sure. Nancy, you can hear okay? I can't hear you. I've got my, it would help if I put
Do you
it
have
on
one?
speaker.
You don't have one.
Hi.
You're not going to talk.
You
I'll pass
there?
you on if you decide to.
Okay, I got to decline an incoming call. Thank you.
Put the mic near her.
Great idea. Oh, I know. I'll just give Nancy her own mic. You there, Nancy?
I am.
Okay. All right. I don't want to. Then hopefully people can hear you now you've got your own microphone.
Dad, thanks for doing all this.
Okay. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you to our Charter Commission meeting. The first item on our agenda is approval of the notes that Jean worked on for the July 21st public hearing that we had. Are there any changes or corrections?
No.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? In favor, Nancy?
Aye.
Thank you.
Abstain, I was not at the meeting.
6, 0, 1. Okay, thank you. The next is a report on the meeting that Lowry and I attended last night with the Select Board regarding our proposed non-binding article for inclusion in the November warrant. There were 3 people there, Bob Falciani, Allison, and Matt Siegel. So we didn't get a lot of feedback from Matt. Allison is positive in some regards about this, and Bob Falciani is as well. I think the final takeaway is that the Select Board wanted to make it more of a direct question instead of saying, do you favor the Select Board or work group evaluating the change? They might want to say, do you favor making the change or having the Select Board propose a change? So they may alter that language to make it a little bit more direct, but they like the idea of having this on the warrant to gauge the voters' interest in whether they want to make a switch to voting by secret ballot all the time.
But it's going to be worded as a
Non-binding.
Non-binding.
Oh, absolutely. They're complete agreement about it being a non-binding article. And I actually got word from Bob later in the day, and he's thinking perhaps they might create another one, and when they have the Select Board meeting to vote on what goes on the warrant, they'll decide which one, whether our original or an edited version of it. And I requested that Bob send me a copy as soon as they have their version of it. Allison seemed to be upset that this did not mean that we were extending the work of the commission to see the results of the non-binding article and then have more input and have the vote on the charter later, sometime next year. But both Lowry and said that our goal was to still have this on the November ballot. And that's certainly something I'm welcome to hear feedback. I mean, feedback from you all, whether you think we should continue to go forward with our schedule.
Without question. I don't think we should move anything because someone on the Select Board thinks we should make it go further in time. I'd like to, we've done a hell of a lot of work and it'd be nice to get it done.
One of the questions was whether the Select Board could then propose a change down the road to the charter without it being a charter commission. And Bill Kelly was here last night, and he seemed to believe there is, and there is support in the main statutes for, you don't have to have a charter commission for every change you make, but you have to make the determination that it's an amendment, not a revision. So they could, without forming another charter commission, they could, depending on the outcome and whatever they decide to do as a result of the non-binding article, proceed later.
Well, I'm good with having it wound up by November, but I'd like to leave that door open just a little bit, just in case we run into things. Like we had 2 people send emails last week saying, I wish I had known, I don't have time. And so leave the door open just in case there's a few things that come forward, that we're not locking ourselves into that date, that we can,
Here's the issue. We're locked in sort of by statute. If we create a final report and deliver it to the select board, it needs to go on the next warrant.
Camden statute or state statute?
State statute. The other thing is timeline. Whatever we have, if it's going to go on the November ballot, the select board votes no later than September 21st to set everything that's on the warrant. So our margin of error, or keeping it open, rather, keeping it open only takes us really, I checked with Bill Kelly, we could theoretically make revisions if they're not substantive in this up until September 30th, but this document, if it's going to be on the warrant, has to be final in time for absentee ballots to be given out. As soon as an absentee ballot is requested or handed out, which is 30 days before an election, whatever is on that warrant has to be final.
All right, so this subject we talked about earlier, about whether or not we want this, to open this up to the warrant be approved by ballot instead of town meeting, that's down the road?
Oh, the issue of town budget, you mean
Yeah.
secret ballot versus open town meeting? Yeah, that would be down the road. This is what we requested to be put on the November ballot.
Okay, so for
It's
now,
just-
we're staying with the town meeting until,
Yes, because that's the current
Okay.
charter. As long as
Okay.
the current
Okay.
charter is in force,
all right.
budget approval is done at open town meeting. So we are, unless this commission votes to not do it in November, we really have to have our work finalized. And to be honest with you, the schedule has to be in a way, we have to have a meeting either September 14th or 15th by Zoom. We can't have the conference room on Wednesday, the 15th, because SIF is sitting up. But we could have the conference room on Tuesday, the 14th. And we would need to vote at that time on the draft of the final report, which goes in the charter and gets presented to the select board. And any final edits that we do as a result of this meeting. And as far as other input, we had that public meeting, and I haven't gotten any new emails at all from anybody, other than a follow-up from the gentleman, John Beitler, who is here. Because he had asked a question, and so I just answered him a question. We haven't gotten any further feedback. So the other way to see if we can generate more feedback before the 15th, if that's going to be our last time to have a vote, would be to try and get something in the newspaper about what our schedule is, and then we've taken in public input, and we've been making our final edits and our final adjustments. And we could do that. If we could do that in the next week or so, that might generate, maybe particularly if we put that email address right up front, that might generate some more feedback for us.
Yeah, I definitely would not be able to make Tuesday.
Okay, so
Cannot do it.
you can't do it. Zoom on the 15th. I know that is not our favorite thing to do.
But we know
Do
how.
that, or I could meet on the 16th
I did not clear Thursday, the 16th.
or Monday.
With Janice. The 20th, we're getting really late because
Monday.
Monday, the 13th.
Is it possible for us to go over the rest of our agenda tonight and then make that final decision tonight? So we don't have to come back for another meeting?
Well,
It's a thought.
Is that a thought?
that is a thought, but we haven't written our final report, which is one of the chapters.
Okay.
I don't have, I had a draft of that I wrote a month ago in thinking we'd get there at some point, but that hasn't been
Okay.
finalized, and that is something that we need to vote and say, yes, this is what we want the final report about our process and our conclusions to say. And I don't think we could do that kind of a vote by email. We could do it by Zoom, and it doesn't have to be a long meeting if that's the only outstanding issue is an agreement on what the final report says. So let's go through the outstanding items that we have tonight. Yeah, Nancy, is that you?
Yes,
Do you have a comment?
I do. And I'd like it on the record.
Absolutely. Jean is here taking notes, and we're live and being recorded.
Okay. What I see as the issue regarding pushing the charter forward, and an analogy might be, we decide to develop a new comprehensive plan, and due to COVID, none of the town committees are meeting. So there's a comprehensive plan committee which puts together their ideas of a comprehensive plan. It's usually the committees that get people involved and the people on the committees who do the major work on the comp plan. It's not townspeople who show up ad hoc to make comments. And then we push forward a comprehensive plan for everybody to vote on without really having the input that we need. And I see as the weakness of the charter that committee meetings were suspended, and so this is not had anywhere to go for key people who already are intimately involved and interested in the town, who would then get their committee people to look at things and comment. It just hasn't happened. And I see that as an issue, and that there hasn't really been, mostly as a result of that, equal citizen participation. And as one of the, I guess, couple elected people to the commission, I feel that's a big loss. And so I'm not sure what Allison McKellar's opinion was about why to hold it, but that's not. I don't think it's representative charter that we're putting forward for those reasons. And I feel like I have to say that to represent constituents who might have voted for me and are just, absent because of all the other stuff going on. And because of the town, which declared that the committees wouldn't meet. So there you go on that one.
Okay. I understand the impact of COVID, and we have said that in the information that we put out, certainly in our press releases. That's how we got an extension to where we are now from the select board, because we didn't meet for 4 months. But prior to that, we had meetings with people from the town staff departments. We have had meetings that have, since we restarted, that have been available to the public, have been broadcast, have been on Zoom. Before we started our first public hearing in July, we had a press release and articles about it. The copy of the annotated version of the draft was available in the town office, in the public library. And as you know, Deb Oliver was able to take advantage of being able to see it on the town website, and it made a number of suggestions, which I'm going to talk about in general tonight. We've had numerous articles in the press about the work that we've been doing. I counted them up at one point, and I think since we started, it was like 13. So I don't feel like we've done it in a complete vacuum. We had public hearing notices that the town sent out about our two meetings. So while I understand what you're saying, and I know that we got those 2 emails from people that were concerned about not being able to have input, they weren't able to come. They obviously couldn't come to either one of the public hearings. Fortunately, Deb Oliver was very good about sending a very detailed list of some great technical copy edits and a couple of suggestions. But I'm not sure that we have not done the promulgation we need to do, but I would like to hear from other members on the commission.
I'd like to make one response. Deborah Oliver contacted me about a separate issue that we've been involved in for about 10 years regarding CMP. And when I phoned her back, I said, by the way, did you know the Charter Commission is working on the charter? And she wasn't aware of it. And I said, well, if you're interested, you can check it out online. And so that's what precipitated that.
Well, that's great. I'm glad you did that.
But the thing is, that's one person, and I still would appreciate a comment in the minutes about why it was that the town suspended committee meetings, and for the record, to have it in the minutes that therefore this was, unlike the comprehensive plan, this was never presented to committees.
Presented to committee? What committee would we have presented it to?
All the town committees, as I understand it, have not been meeting. And I would have thought that that was a way, just as with the comp plan, that anything this important that gets proposed gets.
I have a hand up. I have a hand up here, Nancy. Hold on. Jean White would like to respond. Make sure your mic's close to you.
I was on the comprehensive plan committee, and she's right. We reached out to everybody where it was appropriate and necessary. We have done the same thing here. We've reached out to people in the town government. We've reached out to people on town committees. We've reached out to people to get their input on the changes we were considering proposing. So I think, we've reached out to people. It's not as if we have not. We've had umpteen stories in the paper. It seems to me that people perhaps generally are just not interested. I mean, they had opportunities to come. They had opportunities to listen. When I went on YouTube to see how many people actually chimed into or turned in to see what was going on, to listen on YouTube, there were very few. And those that were there apparently had no questions because it didn't elicit any more questions from people. So personally, I think that we've done a good job in reaching out to those who we had to get input from in order to revise the charter.
Well, two of the committees that are impacted, the Personnel Board, actually met with the Personnel Board and talked to Budget Committee members, of whom we have on the commission. So we reached out to the two committees that are really involved in the charter, as well as having Planning Board representation from members of the Planning Board and former members of the Select Board. But Nancy, I understand what your concern is, and it'll certainly be reflected in the minutes.
Yes, and I do agree with everything you've said that we've done in order to make people aware of what we're doing.
All righty. So next on our agenda, we have some outstanding issues, things we've talked back and forth about, and we need to resolve them one way or the other. Unfortunately, Lowry could not be here, but he did give me some feedback on the items, so which I'll mention to you as we get to them. The first one is in Article 2 regarding the Select Board. We talked a couple of times about the prohibition about holding other offices. We have 30 hours, the current, a limit of 30 hours for a part-time person. We've talked a couple of times about whether it should be 20 for part-time. So I did look up in the Maine state statutes, and the Maine state statute is moot on this subject, so there's no guidance for us on that. So we need to resolve what we're going to say in the charter about prohibition of serving on the Select Board.
I'm in favor of the employees serving, and I think the 30 hours is fine.
Any employee beyond the fire department? Because we have it now, part-time fire.
Oh, that's a tough one.
I think no employee, period,
Okay.
Including fire department?
including firefighters. And I tell you why. Back when this went into effect, the one firefighter, there was 60 firemen down there. Today, there's 23. If you had, the other thing that enters into that is if we say 30 or 20 hours, so let's say a fireman becomes a select person, but we have 5 fires that go 45 hours, which is very easy to do.
Yeah.
Where would he stand?
Right.
On that issue, I don't think, the 30 hours would be a regular 30 hours, week after week after week after week, with, 5 fires within a month to make it more than 30 hours. I don't think that's going to happen 12 months out of the year.
No.
So on that issue, I don't think it would be an issue. But back to your first point, I kind of agree. I'm not really sure as I think employees should be selectmen.
Conflict of interest, is that what you?
Conflict of interest, yes. It's one thing that, people are on committees and different boards and whatever, but the actual selectmen, could the town manager run for selectman?
Probably not,
Yeah, I mean, that would be an absolute conflict.
yeah.
But could the chairman of the planning board also be a selectman and also, work for the town as the finance officer? I'm pulling these out
Well,
of the
I know,
air.
no, I know, you're trying to
It's
think of
all
examples.
hypothetical. But I'm toyed with it.
Selectmen get $2,000 a year, so they are paid by the town, so that
Yeah.
would. Yeah.
Some do work at least 30 hours, some don't. Jim, what's your feeling?
I think that no employee of the town, whoever they are, whatever department, should be on the select board.
I know that, Nancy, you raised an issue about whether just singling out fire department was kosher, whether it would withstand any claim of discrimination from another part-time employee. I couldn't find anything that related to that, and I know you were concerned about that. So the thought of no employee being on the select board, does that sort of solve that issue for you?
That solves the issue. Otherwise, I believe the town can be open to litigation. There was a case litigated in southern Maine. I can't remember which town, but there was a similar sort of rule, and I think it was a school board person who
Yeah.
issue. Yeah, and it turned into a legal case and cost money. It just doesn't make sense to
I'm
accept
going to
that
change my mind. No
about
employee.
a fire person.
Okay.
It's just better to keep it out.
Jean, what's your reaction?
No employee.
Do I have a motion regarding the prohibition of holding offices?
Another point first.
Yes, Mark?
You mentioned that the state is moot on the point.
Yes.
So maybe there's a reason they're moot. There's no real reason for it.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I'd like to make the motion that Article 3 we remove or change so that no employee of the town may hold office on the serve on the
Article
select board.
Yeah, that's Article 2.02, number 3. And the motion is to simply say, no member of the select board shall be an employee of the town while serving on the select board, period. Is that your motion?
Yes.
Second.
All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Aye.
7. So that passes 7-0. No employees. Thank you all. Okey doke. Term limits. 3 3s, 1 off. 3 3s, and you're out. Or something different, or keep it as we have it. So who would like to start with their preference on that?
Is there a reason that it's coming up to conversation again, or you just want to go over these?
No, the reason it's coming up again, because it was raised at our first public hearing by 2 select board members.
Oh,
The
that's
term
right,
limits
that's
was a concern to 2 of them.
were they concerned that they didn't want them or concerned that they wanted them?
One was concerned that if they took a year off, that running again a year later might put them in competing against one of the other select board members, and they did not want to be in that position. But you never know who's going to be running again. I mean, that's one point. Nancy, you had something to say?
Couldn't that happen in any event that you're running against people?
Yes, because if there are two openings and 3 people sign up, 2 of them happen to be select board running for reelection, and there's a third person, yes, that is a possibility.
And John French, I remember, argued to get rid of the waiting year. He thought it was good to have the continuity.
Right, and I think that also might have been Allison's point. I think she was the other person who spoke about it, to have institutional memory.
Important. That's really
9
important.
years, though, and particularly if people are staggered. I mean, John French's brain has been invaluable for this community. John's service, there's no doubt about the fact that he has been a wealth of information as people have turned over on the select board or the planning board, all of that. He seems to have retained everything.
I'm going to suggest we leave it as it is with no term limit, simply because I don't think it has been a problem.
No, it really hasn't been.
And the idea of institutional memory does help. And it's invaluable.
I agree with that.
I agree. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
So keeping it as it is. Jim?
I'm fine with all that.
Jean, you have any comment?
Same.
Okey doke. So,
So what do we have? I can't quite hear.
okey doke. Nancy, we, Bob, Karen, Mark, Jim, and Jean, there seems to be a consensus. We haven't had a motion to not have term limits, to eliminate 2.03 term limits. Instead of, I mean, they're just remove number 2 there. No term limit.
Okay.
Is
I'll put that in the form of a motion, that we just eliminate term limits for the select board.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion?
I'll mention one thing. I'm going to not vote on it because I see equally both sides.
Okey doke, that's perfectly, I know, it's perfectly all right. I mean, in general, I'm fairly in favor of term limits out there in the wild world for elected officials. But I certainly can see in a small community the value of the institutional memory. So we have a motion on the floor. So in section 2.03 in our draft, to eliminate 2.03 number 2 term limits, which means there will be no term limits in this proposed charter draft. Was there a second?
Yes. Yes.
All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4, and 1 abstention.
Right.
That was something we were talking about adding. It was not something that was in there before.
That's correct.
Was no term.
There were no
All right,
term
so
limits, and we're
We're
keeping
going
it.
back to, or we want to keep what was originally there.
Exactly.
Okay.
All righty. So next is 2.09, which is the section on forfeiture. And we've had a couple of conversations regarding that. Our proposal is, I made a proposal to have new language that said that the chair would make that determination of whether it was excused or unexcused based on the factors that we have in the current charter. There were some comments at the public meeting, both of them that we had, that might be an uncomfortable position for the select board chair. And on our last meeting, Peter Gross mentioned that he was concerned about the chair being the determining person in case there was some personal conflict.
The old adage, rank has its privileges and its responsibilities.
The
That
current-
is a responsibility that the chair has to accept.
I do not have an issue with the chairperson making the determination, because as in our first public hearing, one of the select board members was very concerned about the privacy issue. If you remember, concerned that the whole select board would be talking about in a public meeting about whether this absence is excused or not. And to me, that sort of trumps a concern about whether a select board chair might be biased.
Yeah.
I think that's right, Deb. I agree with that.
Deb, I have a question.
Sure.
So Title 30A MRS sets forth that this is possible to remove someone for these reasons.
That is correct.
Okay, does it specifically mention those reasons?
Yes, I don't have that open, but I believe that the language that we have in here, attendance records, circumstances beyond control of the absent member, professional or family commitments, and illness or medical treatments is almost verbatim from Maine statute.
Okay, could that just be double checked?
Certainly. Since we had our meeting after we have discussed this, Bob Falciani got in contact with me, and, you know, there had been a proposal for us to add some language regarding remote meetings, but the advice from Bill Kelly is don't put anything in here about the select board setting up remote meeting policies because the state law is in flux that may be repealed. MMA has one set of recommendations for remote meeting participation. Rockport has come up with their own, and it's different from what MMA has. And Bob says this select board is still trying to figure out how to handle that. But he did request that we add this to the forfeiture language, and I'll tell you why in a minute. In addition, absence is not adherence to an established remote participation policy may be classified as an unexcused absence. The reason he wanted it in there is he is concerned that somebody may choose to participate remotely for reasons that may be lame. I just have to say that.
Yeah.
That it could be
Yeah, I can sit on the couch at home with my laptop and
that's right.
never leave the chair. Yeah.
So the concern is, he feels that if they have an established participation policy with criteria like the state has, that not adhering to that policy would be considered an unexcused absence. In order to because the belief is that if you are on the select board and there are not restrictions due to something like COVID, that you should be participating in person in a meeting. That's his point of view, and that's why he asked for that language to be considered by us, and I ran it by Bill Kelly, and he has no issue with that language. So there's two things to consider. Do we want to go ahead and keep it as the chair being one making the determination based on those factors? And then I think it would be a separate question, do you want to add the language, in addition, absence is not an adherence to an established remote participation policy may be classified as an unexcused absence. So I like a motion on the first item first, and then we can discuss the remote.
So moved. Do I have to repeat it all?
No. So fails to attend 3 regular meetings in a 6-month period without being excused by the chair, and the factors shall be, and as we have them written. Okay. So it actually would say fails to attend 3 regular meetings in any 6-month period without being excused. An absence shall be excused upon a finding by the select board chair that the written request for approval of an absence is reasonable. Factors to be considered by the chair shall include, but not be limited to, attendance record, circumstances beyond the control of the absent member, professional or family commitments, and an illness or medical treatments. All absences shall be recorded in the select board minutes as excused or unexcused. So is that your motion, Mark, to accept that?
Yes.
And I second it.
Karen seconds it. Is there any further discussion on that section of forfeiture?
Yes.
Yes, Mark.
Do you want this additional thing to be added to that, or as a separate 2.0 something, whatever that number would be?
That's a perfectly good suggestion. That would become D, absence is not an to an established remote participation policy may be classified as an unexcused absence. That could be a separate item. And then
Should
E.
it be? Because it is specifically stating about remote participation.
Okay, that is a really good point, but can we vote on C that I
Well,
quoted
that's
and you
why I asked,
voted?
should it be included in that?
Well, we could do that separately. We could amend
Okay.
C, or we could make that sentence a separate issue. So if we could vote on Mark's motion as I read the language. All those,
So I have a question.
yes.
How does this relate to someone, for example, who might want to or need to be present using Zoom because they're called away to a family emergency?
That's going to be up to the chairman and to decide.
Well,
We're not making that determination. We're giving that authority to them to make it.
I would think family commitments, Nancy, if I were select board chair and somebody had to leave town because they had a daughter-in-law that was sick, and they needed to go there, but they could participate by Zoom, but we're not talking about remotes at the moment, but certainly an absence due to a family illness would fall within a category of acceptable absence.
Okay. I'm just a little concerned about the chair making the decision rather than the entire board dealing with the policy.
Okay, so noted. So
Yeah.
noted. The concern is that may violate a privacy issue if that is discussed in an open meeting and why somebody is not in attendance. That's the counter to your feeling about it.
What about handling it as personnel issues are now handled, which is that the select board would have an executive session?
That's for personnel issues, not elected select board members?
Yep. But I'm saying that
So-
to me would seem like a fairer way to do it than to have one person making the decision.
I don't.
Are you suggesting that the
That's
select,
controversial.
are you suggesting that the select board go into executive session to make this issue, to make a decision on this
Yes,
issue?
she is, that the select board, that we add that select board has to go into executive session to determine whether an absence is excused or not. I think that's adding a layer.
Not for each absence, but if in order, this says that a decision can be made by the chair to say that somebody has forfeited their office, and that's pretty serious.
That's
So
not
I-
exactly what it's saying. We're saying that the select board chair makes a determination if the absence is excused or unexcused. The policy is that failure to attend 3 regular meetings without being excused is cause for forfeiture. There's a difference. And the number of absences, excused or unexcused, are recorded in the minutes, and it's triggered by the official record of the select board.
I get that, and still think that the fair way in situations like this would be then it would go to the entire, at some point it would go to the entire select board instead of it being the decision of just the chair.
Okay, so noted. Is there any further discussion on this section? So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And opposed or abstained? Nancy?
Abstain.
Abstained?
Yes.
Okay, Joe? Thank you. So the next thing is Mark brings up the request to consider, quote, absence is not in adherence to an established remote participation policy may be classified as an unexcused absence. And I think Mark's question is, should we include that in C or should we have it as a standalone item? Mark?
I would like to make a motion that we make it as a separate entity is the next 2 point whatever
Okay.
those numbers are.
That would be 2.091D, and what would happen is the current D would become E.
Okay, and I suggest we take out the word "in addition."
Correct, since it's not part of that paragraph.
Okay. Accept that on the motion.
Okay, so absence is not an adherence to established remote participation policy may be classified as an unexcused absence. That was a motion by Mark
Second.
and seconded by Karen. Is there any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor? 6. Nancy?
7.
7. 7-0. All right, I'm moving right along. Okey-doke, next is 2.11, which is advisory committees. We had put in our draft that in order to to discontinue any advisory committee, the select board was required to have a public hearing, which just means putting a notice in the paper that that's going to be voted on by the select board or discussed by the select board. And Lowry had suggested that if they need to have a public hearing to discontinue it, he suggested a public hearing to establish one. So we had not come to a conclusion on that, and Bill Kelly has said we could do either or neither.
I think that's in a way micromanaging. If you have a hearing to establish a committee, if something comes up, there are issues in the town which the selectmen want to see resolved or investigated further, they establish a committee.
Yeah.
It's different when you disengage or when you end something that's been going on, handling issues. Maybe you could continue to still handle issues, and maybe there are people who want to see it gone, and there could be a conflict, and therefore you have a hearing so people can express both sides.
I agree.
I would like to make one comment. In the select board enumeration of powers, it does talk, I can't put my finger on it, but it does talk about investigative. The select board may investigate any matter, and that's sort of the power. That's in the main statute, and that is the power that gives them the ability to select advisory committees, and the main state statute does not say that they're required to have a public hearing before they do any investigation or appoint anybody to do an investigation. So that would be the one, that would be sort of to me, the backup for not requiring one on the front end. But I agree, as almost out of a courtesy to all the people that have been serving on a committee, before it's discontinued, it might be helpful to have the public hearing so they have the opportunity to speak.
Thought on this. There are two types of committees. There are standing committees like Parks and Rec or, whatever. There's committees to look into having a 200th anniversary fair. Okay, it's only going to happen once, okay?
Right.
So there's got to be a distinction there.
We call them advisory committees. I would say what you're talking about, the 200th anniversary or, a new event at the Snow Bowl, I wouldn't say that was an advisory committee. I would say that's an ad hoc committee.
You can also say at the time that the committee is created, that it's created within these parameters, this time frame.
There's a sunset clause to it. It's
Right. Right.
for a
For a
certain purpose.
specific purpose.
So I don't really feel there's a need to have a public hearing if you're going to disband the committee that,
No, I would think that if there is a sunset clause in the creation of the committee, there's no need to have a public hearing to disband.
But if the standing committees that Mark's talking about,
I'll use an example. Years ago, school budget got shot down 2 or 3 years in a row, and they formed a separate committee to look into funding our school. And then I was on that committee. We met like 3 times, and then they told us to go away because they decided to build their own school without state help.
Right.
So it just kind of ended.
$7 million or something, they were able to get them, move their name up on the list.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we say in here, as they deem necessary, the select board may establish advisory committees and appoint committee members by an affirmative vote of 3 select board members. In establishing an advisory committee, the select board shall outline the committee's purpose, responsibilities, membership qualifications, terms, and shall appoint a liaison from the select board. Now, we could add language that says the select board may include a time frame for which this committee shall be served or not. I mean,
I say leave it as it is at this point in time.
and so that would be without any rear end public hearing as well?
No, yeah, yes, without any.
Without any discontinuance public hearing?
For any committee at all? So they can just end the committee and we don't have to have a public hearing about it?
On the other hand, I remember when the Harbor Committee was disbanded, that was a real freak.
That's right, that happened like, boom.
Conservation Committee.
Same thing
Commission.
happened with the, sort of the Conservation Commission, there was something like that?
Yeah.
And all of the.
Is that what was triggering this decision, this question?
No, well, I'll tell you what triggered my thoughts about it. We created this section about advisory committees to make sure that there were some criteria that the select board needed to give them a purpose and responsibilities and set terms, because that, we don't have that anywhere. And when COVID happened and all of the committees were put on hiatus, they're not officially discontinued to anybody's knowledge. The select board continues to put on their list the idea of having a work meeting to talk about committee structure. It concerned me personally that all of a sudden a committee would be disbanded or discontinued without any input from the committee members. For instance, I'm also chairman of a committee on a hiatus called the Downtown Design Team. I'm not excited about the prospect of getting an email or reading the newspaper that committee that I've been working on and my 6 other people that I've been sharing the last 3 or 4 years with working on this committee is no longer in existence.
I'm just wondering on this wording for committees like for the Centennial and all that, that somewhere in there we could put something at the select board discretion, terms can be set for certain committees.
Or this does not
or
apply to,
timeframes.
or this does not apply to ad hoc committees?
That's a good one too. Yeah?
Well, then you have to define ad hoc, define standing, define advisory, and
I don't think,
I mean, the perfect example of what happened is there's still nothing in here to define it. The select board suspended committee meetings, and there were no hearings. There wasn't anything that happened. They just did it. And so that's not so good to have in town government, because committees can have an influence upon what the select board is doing. And if the select board just decides that they want to suspend all the committees, I don't think that's not right. And I don't like that happening. And this even says the select board may vote to discontinue after a public hearing, not shall require, a public hearing shall be required before the select board discontinues any advisory committee, which is how it should be written.
or you could say the select board may vote to discontinue any advisory committee only after a public hearing, after only holding a public hearing.
We've just had
It's may, and it needs to say, if it's going to be just optional, that still makes it optional. They may or may not. It needs to say, a public hearing shall be required before the select board just discontinues, or it should say suspends any committee. Any committee. I mean, these committees all got suspended. What happened to historic resources?
Parks and Rec.
Yeah, all these just gone. And so far, there hasn't even been discussion about reviving them.
Yeah.
And a few times I've had to talk to somebody like in Parks and Rec about something not related to the charter. They aren't happy about it, but you know, it's sort of like people are just saying what, but not doing anything about it.
I'm on Parks and Rec. We haven't met in a year and a half.
Really?
I haven't had an email about anything in months.
Yeah, and another example is the Route 1 Advisory Committee. That was called an advisory committee. We met for several years and worked very hard on that. And all of a sudden, and Bob Falcione was the then chair, then he got elected to the select board, and Route 1 committee stopped meeting. And I called a couple of times to say, what's going on? Well, it was nobody's holding a meeting. It wasn't officially disbanded. None of us who were on it, or
Route 1.
the public people who showed up who were counting on us because of Route 1, had a chance to say anything about it. It was just all of a sudden there were no meetings. And it makes a citizen who has been very involved, as I was on that, start to look irresponsible to people who were counting on the committee to do something, and they don't realize select board just didn't bother to, or the chair of the committee didn't call meetings, and select board didn't say anything about it.
So your suggestion is that the last sentence in Section 2.1, number 2, be a public hearing shall be required before the select board discontinues or suspends any advisory committee.
Not just advisory, because that means then you use the word term ad hoc. What's the definition of that?
I don't know, I'm talking to you on my phone, so I can't look it up on Google.
Well,
Anybody
standing
else took their
committees
phone out?
Are what these other committees were. DOT was an advisory committee, meant to be temporary, but just all of a sudden nobody had meetings and everyone acted sort of clueless about why we weren't having them.
Could we use the term temporary committee instead of the term ad hoc?
No, I think we need to use the terms standing, because people in town know what that means, and then the definition for standing committee goes in the glossary, and advisory committees, and the definition of that goes in the
I don't know the
glossary.
difference between an advisory committee and a standing committee, Nancy. I think they're the one and the same.
Yeah, I think a standing committee would be, as I would imagine it, unless there's a different term for it, would be Parks and Recreation, Pathways Committee, Historic Resources Committee. the
Those are all advisory because they report to the select board. They advise the select board. So those are all advisory committees. And we could put a definition in the glossary that says advisory committee, committee established by the select board that reports and is responsible to the select board.
Is that the purpose of these committees? Is that the purpose of a Parks and Rec committee, to report to the select board? Or is it also there to work with citizens and be responsible and responsive to citizens who are...
Nancy, all of that goes in the committee's directive, which is what we cover when we say that they outline the committee's purpose, response, and responsibilities. That's why we added this. So a number of years ago, the select board began to make a more uniform directives for committees in order that the committee would know what their purpose was, what they were to be working on. And that's all part of the directive. I don't know whether we need, well, I don't want to overdo the definition of this.
If there's committees and they've been suspended and they aren't meeting, Bob Haskell mentioned it. you
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with you about the suspension and discontinuance. I'm only talking about getting terribly nitpicky about what an advisory committee is.
Then we would say any town committee.
No, advisory committees. Or we could say advisory committees to the select board. But that's what they are.
That's what they've always been.
No, they're town committees. What other town committees out there?
Nancy, I think we're splitting hairs here. I think your suggestion of how to word the public hearing requirement is excellent. A public hearing shall be required if the select board discontinues or suspends any advisory committee, and I think that that covers it. I honestly do.
Okay. And then just to point out that there are 3 other groups specifically called out in the charter that are accepted from this, which is the Planning Board, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the Conservation Commission.
We don't need to say that because they're not advisory committees. They are established by They are established by statute.
They're established by statute. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, right.
I'm
So we
just-
don't need to mention the
I'm
exception.
pointing that out, Deb. I'm not
Okay.
saying it should not be mentioned, but I'm just at this point pointing that out.
Okay, sorry, Nancy, misinterpreted. All righty, where do we stand? It sounds like we may be changing the last sentence to say, a public hearing shall be required before the select board discontinues or suspends any advisory committee, period. Is
That
that
sounds fine to me. So move.
so moved by Karen?
Second.
Yeah, yes.
By Jim Hurd? Okay,
I do not think we need to add in the
public hearing ahead of time.
public hearing before creation.
Okay.
We don't need that.
No.
All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nancy?
In favor.
7 zip. Thank you very much. Thank you for that very good discussion. Let me make public hearing to, no, just public hearing to dismiss. Okey doke. Article 6, round 532 on the number of members of a budget committee. I spoke to Lowry right before the meeting, and his suggestion was actually just to say 11, not 9 and 2, but if you establish the number 11, then a quorum would be 6, as opposed to 9 and 2 alternates, in which quorum would be only 5. And I
like
thought
that.
that was an excellent suggestion.
So too.
Exactly, yep.
I'm sure Lowry would make that motion if he were able to be
So
here.
move.
Second.
Let's read that motion once more, please.
The motion is to set the number of members of the Budget Committee as 11, all, with no alternates.
Yes.
That was been moved and seconded.
Is there any feedback on that from the select board the other night? Did that even come up in conversation? Because you were really talking about,
It still makes me nervous.
Not last night. In our second public hearing, there's only one person who commented on the budget side, and he was interested in 3 people on the Budget Committee.
And Allison did bring up the point of people get appointed or drafted or finagled into joining the budget committee was almost like a starting point for getting into town government. And
Well-
that's just a point of reference.
Well, the Budget Committee is a wonderful place for people to learn about the town and then move on to either other committees or the select board. No doubt about it. That's a very valid point. That's how a lot of people moved on to other things and became select board members or planning board members, because it is a great learning place.
but I think the people on this committee, and many of them who have been on the budget committee more than once, some of us have been on 3 times.
Lucky you.
Lucky me, but I think the issue is trying to get something done. 21 or 21, it's unwieldy.
The last time I was on it, we had difficulty getting that quorum of 13.
Really?
We had many meetings where we had just the 13 there.
And I'd like to say, I will say this again, all the research we've done on how other town meeting form of governments and even hybrid forms of government, how many people they have on their budget committees. Damerscott, well, that's not even a town meeting form of government. They're all 9 or less.
Yeah.
And most of them are appointed, not elected. We're retaining the right to have our committee members, budget committee members elected.
I have a question.
Shoot.
Why did Lowry think we should take out the 2 alternate members?
His comment was that if you have 9 and 2 alternates, you have only 9 people who are authorized to vote, and that makes your quorum only 5. taking it to 11 regular members increases the quorum by 1 up to 6, and he thought that that you would also give you 2 more members that were participating on a regular basis every budget committee.
So it is going to be 11 regular members and 2 alternates?
That is what the motion and second is, just 11, no alternates.
That's what I asked. Why not the addition of 2 alternates?
I don't think they're necessary. It's just you're a member or you're not, that's it.
I agree.
This way you hear all the information at each meeting, and if you're an alternate, you're coming perhaps and you're not even being involved for meeting after meeting after meeting.
You're not as invested.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Half of the alternates don't come in.
Right.
Having been on the planning board at one point in my life for a number of years, sometimes that happened, that alternates didn't feel like they were as essential. And-
Call me if you want me.
and my experience on committees, and when I was on ZBA, we had alternates. But if you started an issue and then you went to, it got continued to another meeting, you couldn't have an alternate step in because they may or may not have been at the first meeting. So, or if an alternate was at the first meeting and then the regular member showed up at the next meeting, you were obligated to not let them participate because they hadn't heard the first part of the, and that being a quasi-legal
Yeah,
was a big issue.
Yeah. right.
So here, leave it at just straight members and that's it.
Did we have a motion?
Did
So
we have
move, we do 11.
11 regular members on the budget committee? Is there a second? Jim Hurd seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Are you raising your hand, Nancy?
I am.
Okay.
All right. Emergency funding. Remember, this is the thing that we created because the select board had talked about wanting to have some flexibility when it came to funding, particularly during something like the COVID. And we've had a number of discussions about this. John French has been very articulate, and I'm sorry he's not here tonight, about saying that even though we're saying, you know, in theory, this is the last resort, his feeling has been that there are other alternatives available to the select board before they would get to the emergency funding need for it. And obviously can always call a special meeting. Lowry's comment to me was that he would be okay with eliminating this because he felt it was a wedge. And he would not be opposed if we deleted it.
I agree with that 100%.
Me too.
I think we're trying to create an answer to a problem that we're speculating might never happen.
And
And they'll, if something happens, they'll deal with it. It's
And-
that simple.
And we do have the surplus account,
Yeah.
which is available to them. There is the contingency account that gets funded every year in the budget
Right.
that is available. And, you know, I've sort of changed my thinking on this. Even though the special town meeting that was held at the Snow Bowl in February wasn't purely adding money to the budget to spend, it was to approve the bond or the loan in order to have all that special work done. 164 people turned out in February in the Snow Bowl to roll down their windows and raise their cards to vote.
Yeah.
That was a pretty nice night.
And that was a very great night. I think it showed
That's why
that,
I think we should have had a town meeting, but that's beside the point. Yes.
Hey, Deb,
I wonder why they thought it was okay to go by car but never show up.
just a moment of levity.
On the chair.
Under section 6.1, emergency funding, item 2, what kind of a notice is that?
where? On number 2?
Yeah.
2, public notice, a public hearing shall be held on 7 days posted notice prior to said authorization of additional appropriations.
No, it says pubic notice, and I just wonder what kind
Oh,
of.
my God in heaven.
I've never seen one, never heard of that.
Pubic
Just in
You
case.
it's a typo.
You don't
If you-
even, don't even try and guess, okay? Don't- shh.
Okay.
I will take ownership of that typo because I find myself making that typo. I've made that typo before. So is there a
And
motion?
spell check does recognize
Spell check
certain words.
recognizes it.
Spell
yeah.
check. Oh, Jim Hurd.
Just for that, I think he should go over every item in the charter and spell
One
check.
more time. You need to do a search and replace on that term to see if it shows up anywhere else in the charter, Jim.
Well, if it is, I'll be
All right.
shocked.
Did I hear a motion made?
Yes.
So is the motion to eliminate section 6.11 on emergency funding?
Yes.
Second.
Any other discussion? 6.11 is 80, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is your hand raised, Nancy?
7.
7.
You counted me before I got my hand up, but that's
So
okay.
6.11, I think you made second in the motion. 6.11 is 86, does it say in the
Both 1
restaurant
and 2.
trade? 1 and 2, because 2 applied to 1, so.
Okay, very good. Go on.
All right, so that's really the end of our open items. Actually, you know what we didn't do, and I'm sorry. I want us to go right back up to number 3, which is vote and give approval to make technical copy edits and corrections of punctuation. It includes some reordering of phrases within sentences to clarify meaning and/or reordering of lists and the method of indicating terms found in the glossary. None of these corrections involve a change in policy. This came partly because Nancy Cottle Johnson spent 3 hours a number of weeks ago going through the whole charter with a fine-tooth comb, and then spent 3 hours with me, additional 3 hours with me on the phone, going over absolutely all of these technical edits. And then Deb Oliver contributed a number of, again, technical copy edits, such things as a better way to identify those things that are in the glossary, saying if you bold the word and then put C in the glossary, it's much easier to recognize that that's the term or the words you need to look up in the glossary. That kind of a suggestion, I think, was excellent. She also pointed out some things that were unclear, whether our definition was about permanent digital recording or just digital recording. She also pointed out inconsistencies throughout the charter on how we handle gender neuter terms. I mean, this is what this
I think you
person
mean
does
gender
for.
neutral, not gender neutered. You said neutered.
You're on it, you are on it, Bill.
Sorry.
All right, you get my drift.
Yes, yeah. What do you need? Do you need a motion for us as the committee to accept your?
Accept the technical copy edits, reordering
So
and
moved.
clarification of terms.
Second.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. I see 6 hands. 7th hand. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Nancy, for
Thank you,
doing all
Nancy.
that searching.
But she missed people.
No, yeah. So did Deborah Oliver. Okay, so what that'll allow me to do after this meeting is go through with all of the things that we voted on, all of those technical copy edits that have been pointed out, reordering of some language, and Lowry cleaned up the financial procedures section on endowment funds as well to make all of those changes. Get that version of the charter out to every one of us on the commission. So we will have it in our hands, and I will be offline for 3 days, but I will get that done early next week, and get that to Janice, so that gets out to everybody and gets reposted as the new draft.
That will be the
So
one that
far.
goes to the selectmen.
And you'll be
For-
back for that week.
But I will be back for that next week, so we can approve a final report that would go in there. So as a result of this meeting and that vote, thank you very much. Get all that nitty-gritty things done. So next we move on to number 5, which was a suggestion of an addition of a preamble. And this was a suggestion that came from Deb Oliver. I included some I'm looking at the wrong thing. I included some samples of preambles, and do you all think that is something that you are interested in adding? I
like
didn't
Sanford's.
I didn't find lots in Maine, but I found some, and Deb Oliver did as well. The one from Huntington Beach, California is a very full one. Obviously, the Constitution of the United States has a preamble as well. But this would, the preamble would go before the original article. It's stating what we're about. And so you said you like Sanford's?
Sanford, it's short, it's sweet, it says all that you have to say. You don't have to go into all this,
We, the people of,
Wokeism.
we, the people of Sanford, in order to reaffirm the customary and traditional liberties of the people with respect to the conduct of our local government, and to take the fullest advantage inherent in the Home Rule Amendment to the Constitution of the State of Maine, do hereby adopt the following charter for the town of Camden, Maine. I think it's clean. It states the purpose of why there's a charter.
I'm looking at the back of the page.
yeah.
So
I
it's,
think
yeah,
it says all we
it's
have to say.
second to
I
the
don't think you
last
need to
page,
go
and I'll get down it.
further into that.
I know that there are more words that could be added, but, for instance, if you look at one of the ones from California, talks about aesthetics and quality of life and prudent fiscal policies. There's an awful lot there, and I think if we were going to add all of that, that would actually, should require a public discussion.
Yeah,
It's
I don't think,
talking about values that we haven't had a public discussion about, and they may be great values, and that may be a good discussion to have, and that's something I think that if somebody down the road wanted to enhance the preamble, that would be a worthy discussion to have.
I think it goes much too far. It doesn't need to be that in-depth.
In addition to the Sanford motto, that we should add the sentence, that's the last sentence in the Newton, Mass. Charter. We expect and intend that our government will be welcoming and inclusive and will promote equality and respect for all people. I think that's very important.
I didn't hear what she said.
It is, we expect and intend that our government will be welcoming and inclusive and will promote equality and respect for all people.
It's right here.
The last sentence.
That's the last sentence in Newton on the very last page.
I think that's to be understood. I don't think you have to,
Doesn't hurt my feelings either way.
Yeah.
I don't really think it's necessary, but it doesn't hurt.
Doesn't quite go with his style, and we, the people of Camden, in order to reaffirm the customary and traditional liberties of the people with respect to the conduct of our local government, and to take the fullest advantage inherent in the Home Rule Amendment to the Constitution of the State of Maine, do hereby adopt the following charter for the city, for the town of
Where are you
Camden.
looking?
I'm rereading Sanford and figuring out where,
Yeah.
where Nancy suggested sentence would go.
It doesn't really,
I think that's good.
It doesn't
the way it
fit.
is.
Yeah, I
Well,
do
then,
too.
the way it would say Camden, and of course, town of Camden substitute or Sanford.
That probably would be a really good idea.
And then followed by a sentence that says, the town of Camden
You can't
expects and
dictate
intends that our government, or the town of Camden's government will be welcoming and inclusive and will promote equality and respect for all people, something like that. I think it's an important statement to have.
I don't.
is that what the
I
government
don't think
does?
it's important at all.
No.
No.
We have to be a little careful when we copy things from other people. Plagiarize may be the good form of flattery, but I once had a fellow photographer copy my price list. The only problem was he also included my phone number with it on his printed literature.
There you
Well, we are
go.
plagiarizing Sanford, but it's interesting how similar that is to Newton, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Or is it yeah, the beginning of Newton, Massachusetts. And I didn't include, there are about 8 of them I found in Massachusetts, they all were identical.
Oh, really?
Plagiarizing when you do that. I mean, we have our U.S. Constitution, we restate that in a lot of places. It's
Yeah.
not a plagiarizing. Yeah.
So do I have a motion that we, with the change of the name of the town, adopt the preamble of Sanford without the additional sentence? Is that the motion at the moment?
Second.
Is there any further discussion?
I think it should have the other sentence.
I know you do, Nancy.
We're not
I know.
advocating for that.
Once you start adding those things, I think it becomes
Yeah.
a long list.
Yep.
But I think this is a good start. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 here. Is there another vote?
I'm opposed because I feel it's not inclusive.
Okey-doke.
And I want to
That the
have
inclusive language is not included. It isn't exclusive, but you're saying it doesn't add the inclusive language, and you think that's important.
that's right. I'd like that into the record on the minute.
Absolutely. It's in the minutes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I think issues from 818, I think John Bettler, I believe his name is pronounced, recommended that the employee policy be reviewed every 5 years. And in our final report, we do mention the statement of purpose that the Personnel Board wrote for themselves, and I'm going to include that in the final report because that's a recommendation since we're asking them to be a committee. We could add that as a suggestion, but that really would be up to the Select Board once the Personnel Committee becomes an advisory committee. Yes.
I'm not sure as we can put anything in on personnel that due to contracts, due to negotiations, due to unions, we can't put anything in a charter telling them they have to do something, which may be a negotiated.
Oh, because contracts may be negotiated every so often.
You can't tell them they have to do it every 5 years when they may be negotiating contracts on a yearly basis so that I think that's just stay away from that.
I know that Peter Gross was saying that he believed, I'm just trying to remember some of the things that came up that were important. Peter Gross thought it was important to retain the town meeting, open town meeting for voting on the budget. He thought to give the select board the ability to approve the police in general ordinances was okay, but we had decided not to do that at this point, which would make it more of a hybrid form of government. And I don't know if there was really any other call to action in that meeting. Jean has written up the notes from our meeting on the 18th, and we'll have those to approve and review at our next meeting.
Okay.
And we should also approve at the next meeting the final report, which will be one of the articles. And then we'll have to take a vote on the record of putting this, and having a count. If somebody does not want to put this forward, they're perfectly able to vote no, but we do need to have a formal vote on putting this forward to the select board.
Okay. I'd like to make maybe a point of order.
Certainly.
When we first voted, the first thing we voted on tonight was the approval of the July 21st public hearing.
Correct.
And I abstained because I wasn't at that one. I was wrong. I was at that one. It was the 18th.
It's the
that
18th.
the one
Okey-doke.
last week that I missed.
All right, so do you
So-
want to change that vote and be a non-abstention?
It makes little difference. It passed, but just
A point of record,
point
that you
of,
were
point of
there.
record, I was at that meeting. It was the meeting on the 18th
you
last
missed.
week
All
that
right.
I missed.
Okey-doke. All right, so in order to have the next meeting, I need to check with Janice on the Monday, on the 13th, because Karen is not available on the 14th, and it's important that we all participate because it's the final vote.
13, where are we? 13, 15, and 16.
Okay, 15, we can't do in person, we'd have to do by Zoom, only because SIF is in here.
Let's shoot for the 13th.
I have to check with Janice to see if it's available. And then
Be done upstairs?
we know because we need to be YouTubed live
Oh,
and
they
in
did-
person.
Oh, I thought we did YouTube up there. No?
Oh, you mean the Opera House?
Yeah.
I'll be setting up in there too. SIF.
Yeah.
What about doing it at a different time rather than 6:45, 6, sort of 6?
On the 15th, if they're not in here from dawn,
Well, I mean on Tuesday, if on Monday. Karen can come on Monday.
she can't come on Tuesday.
Right, so if we can't do it Tuesday. So if we did it Monday and it isn't available at 5:45, what if we did it a little later? I don't know about work, but you can get out of work earlier if you have to.
Yeah. Tuesday's my only late day. I get out at 7. The others are 5:30, 5,
Well, that's still
4:30,
5:30, so
that
it's
kind
still
of
the
thing.
same
So
time.
I'll ask Janice about Monday, and if we can't do it the 13th, do you want me to ask about the, no, we can't do it in here on the 16th. SIF will be in here for the whole rest of the,
let's shoot for the 13th.
we'll shoot for the 13th, and if we can't do it, we'll
Not
have
gonna
to
be-
Zoom it on the
You're
15th.
not going to be back
I'll be back the night of the 12th.
the night of the 12th. Okay. Oh, God. Oh.
God willing, in the,
Yeah.
you know,
And we have to have this to the select board by
First?
That will be it.
21st.
that's, yeah, but here's, the language that goes on the ballot is, and it's determined by main statute. I'm not going to quote it directly, but it basically is, shall the town approve the revised charter as proposed by the Charter Commission? End of article on the ballot. I mean, it may have 5 more words in it, but there's not a lot to actually have the select board approve the language, but we have to have our report complete, and that has to be in here, and I have to get that to them. I have to get the final report to them by the 17th of September in order for it to go in the packet.
Do I have to be here to vote? Can I do an absentee vote?
Well, we'll do it by Zoom if we have to.
We have Nancy voting by
Yeah, but I
phone.
can't be on the phone because I'm on the phone.
Because she's on the phone at work.
at work.
Oh, okay.
Well, we'll handle it, and I will get in touch. I need to delegate this because I'm leaving town at dawn. Jean? Would you contact Janice to see if we can hold our meeting on the 13th of September, please? She told me we can Zoom on the 15th, but I didn't ask her about Monday. If you would do that and let everybody know, I would really appreciate it. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
All in favor? We adjourned. Nancy, thank you for participating by phone. If everybody would turn off their mics, and I'll go